nothing great has been created under that kind of constraint. The creators of it, whether the writers themselves are talented or not, they're being handed money by people who are rationalists. And rationalists make really bad stories.
What do you make of the Trump stuff? What do you make of the Trump assassination? What are you seeing in the group chats?
Yeah, I mean, it's been wild. I think the response from the left has just been fascinating because it's a different kind of response than we would have gotten if it would have gone through, if it would have happened. So it was this fascinating thing where everybody's apologizing, or everybody's like saying they're really glad that Trump's okay. You know, Biden's saying he's glad Trump's okay, and also he's the worst person on the planet, and this should have happened. It's if we were all looking for some kind of like logical coherence to their worldview, then we would be flummoxed right now. But it's very clear now that this is not just people trying to be logically consistent, trying to make sure that their ideas, because I mean, like most people on the right are like rationalists, basically. And so we're confused when people contradict themselves, and when some story or when they say something that's inconsistent with something they said several years ago. But the left, they're not they can't be understood by us rationalistic right wingers. So maybe we should stop being rationalists and at least understand what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, what is the logical conclusion if you were 150 feet away from literally Hitler? We were just talking about the same. The right. Entire narrative of sort of the West since 1949 is that it's your moral duty to stop that individual. And indeed, to right. not stop that individual is to partake, to be complicit, as it were, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
How do you?
Oh man, and turns out that somebody took that seriously.
Right.
There are plenty of reasons to be thinking about what is this person's connection? Who let this happen? That kind of thing. Lots of reasons to think that. I look forward to your conversation with Eric Prince about that. But the particulars of it could just as easily be a guy who just watched the news enough and just like a guy who believes the propaganda enough. And all you have to do is maybe look the other way once. And it's, all your wildest dreams come true for the left.
Yeah. I think he was, I was reading somewhere that I think he was 20 years old. So you think about it, for the majority of his very short adult life, he grew up in the Trump times, where Trump being the enemy of mankind, the enemy of democracy, the enemy of the West. Right. And
so he would have been 11 years old when Trump came on the scene. Yeah.
Right. When Trump came on the scene, and then there was another interesting blurb. It was just awful to read, but you realize all the pieces are stacking up, where his classmates lost total touch with him during COVID because school went remote. And so he just disappeared. He became like this. It sounded like, from what I was reading, it seemed like he became a totally online guy during the 18 months or whatever, 2 years that the Pennsylvania schools went remote. And so we're sort of seeing the receipts come due for a lot of the cultural things that we've been stacking for 10 years or so, which is insane.
Yeah. What was your reaction when you saw all of that going down as it was happening? What was going through your head?
Yeah. I was sitting down watching a documentary about airplanes with my 6-year-old. So, and then I just I'll check the internet for a couple minutes, and then, oh gosh, like the biggest story of my lifetime just happened. But we finished the documentary, but then I quickly got to tweeting. But dude, I mean, like the first time you watch it, you read shots fired at Trump rally on somebody's tweet, and you think like, oh, it's one of those stories like, oh, I bet that that's crazy that something happened. And then you watch the video and you see him grab his ear and fall down. You like, as it slowly dawns on you, oh, I'm witnessing something significant. And you can see that even in the crowd, like the fact that the crowd doesn't understand all it is loud noise. Right. All it is, and then suddenly somebody in the crowd sees somebody laying dead on the ground. Somebody sees the president, the former president, collapse on the floor and Secret Service swarm him. And then we all just kind of went through that journey together. It was bizarre. And because we weren't all watching live, we were all sort of catching up. It was this bizarre thing where everybody on the planet everybody in the country was thinking about the same thing for once. And we've had a handful of those this year, but yeah, how it hit me was just first a total surrealness, and then I knew, now we know what the media plays are going to be. We like just all of a sudden a very clear picture of the media run call for unity, and also how in the world could we ever figure out the motive of this crazy loon who just happened to do something. But yeah, those are my first thoughts, first things that kind of hit me. I'd be curious where you guys were, what was going on in your life.
The first thing I saw was a tweet of a screenshot from CNN where it said, like, I think it was CNN that said Trump Secret Service tackles Trump after a fall, or one of those. Okay. And I was like, what is going on in Pennsylvania? And then but the tweet was like a screenshot of that saying like despicable narrative spinners or something. And so I started looking around and then saw the actual event that was going on. So my my first interaction with the event was through the machine of the media trying to spin it into Trump just fell. Yeah. Trump just there were loud noises, right, or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. I mean, to your point, I think the first second or two, it's striking the normalcy that like where he grabs his ear as if he had been like stung by a bee or something. Just a natural reaction. Right. And then it's almost like 2 full seconds before he realizes he's being shot at and drops down. Right. And everyone else realizes, which is crazy. But yeah, I mean, I was shocked, I guess, one, that and this is now what a lot of the discourse is around, is that the shooter was even able to get into that position, that was even a scenario that was allowed to take place for whatever reason. And then I was totally blown away by the optics of the scenario with the photos that came out. Is just went from, Trump looking like he got stung by a bee to this was an assassination attempt to this is a historic, like visually, like not factually, but also visually historic moment.
Totally. Oh, and I'm sure that like every dude pictures himself in that situation and like wishes that he would have responded exactly like Trump did. Because like me, I picture myself in it and I just go, my brain would turn off. I would just be like, and then the Secret Service would just drag me to wherever I needed to go. But like the fact that in that moment he was like, wait, I got to pump my fist a little bit with blood streaking down my face. And say fight. Oh, it's perfect.
Yeah. It was perfect.
Oh, it was so good.
So what do you?
Yeah, as a Trump fan, it was a great moment.
I'm curious, what do you make of it so you're a narrative maker. How do you see it from the, like, if you were on the left, if you were a Twitch streamer or a somebody working for Washington Post, whatever, how do you think you'd approach this? And what should we expect on from the narratives on that side of things?
Right. Yeah. The optics are horrible for Trump's enemies, just horrible, because he did such a good job, had such great instincts. And the timing, if it would have been successful on their end, was basically perfect. If it would have been successful, he hasn't picked a VP. He hasn't been, confirmed as the nominee. It's just all been presumptive at this point. It's before the RNC. They could still, and it's coming off of Biden having a horrible couple of weeks. So the debate being a huge contributing factor, but the fact that comes so quickly after that, because it wasn't successful, just like supercharges the support that Trump already had. And we've all seen, they've come after him in all these ways, and he's gotten past it. But this is the first time I think he basically had no personal choice in it. So it was a total like divine intervention moment that it skimmed past his head. It wasn't because he was so he's gotten out of other things because he's so bombastic, or he's gotten out of other things because he's clever. He's gotten out of other stuff because somebody else fumbled the ball. And there's no clear he's a hero thing to point to, and there are a handful of clear, oh, they don't know what they're doing things to point to. But again, that split second turn, everybody's seen those images now of where the brain is and where the bullet grazed and where he turned. But yeah, that this is something that is not just Teflon Don. Oh, he's so good. What I love about it is that he had nothing to do with how cool that was, except for, again, in his response to it. So that's again, me as a Trump fan. Like I'm thrilled when he does get past stuff and he does have good lawyers or he has good people on his side. But yeah, it's a great moment for him. Successful. If it were successful, it would have been great for the left because it would have at least made Biden seem, Biden would be more alive than Trump was, and that's all he would have had to be. And now it's, everything, he's just stronger. And now he's got a literal scar, a chunk of his ear is gone. And he's like, he's punished Trump. He is physically punished Trump coming back 2024. Here we go. So, I don't know how the left deals with this other than, just sort of what they've said they're going to do, which is resigning themselves to a second Trump term. And so if they resign themselves to a second Trump term, then that just means, okay, Biden was on the way out anyway. Kamala was never going to be the person. So I guess now the only tactic for the left is just to minimize the effectiveness of Trump. And so I think that's where they are right now. Best case scenario for them, Trump gets in office and we can slow him down a ton. He can still be the big bad guy. And again, that's assuming that there's not some a repeat event of this weekend.
Yeah, I'm curious about how you see the whole landscape. Even with a lot of the videos that you've been putting out, which have been really good, the long form, or I guess long form, short form, where you explain a concept. It seems like I saw a post earlier today. It was Catherine Boyle from A16Z saying that this is the first meme election. We've had we've had the TV elections in the past with Reagan and some of those guys, and then we had
social media with
in 2016. But this is really the first meme election where you can't. I mean, I was seeing posts of longtime libs who said, I hate Trump so much, but just seeing that picture of him with his fist up in the air and blood streaming out down his face, it sparked something visceral in me that makes me think I can't hate this guy anymore. He's cool.
Right.
So
yeah,
how leading up to assuming we don't know about the Trump stuff yet. So up until whatever Friday night, Saturday night, what's your strategy for using content, for using memes, for using Twitter and X? What has been your strategy? And then moving forward, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. As far as what my strategy is, it's doing content that has to do with news events. So I basically have two kind of baskets of content that I'm doing. One is news events, another is going through books and essays from the past. So the kind of books and essays part of it, I grew up as a conservative person, and so but I realized, everybody talks about how conservatives haven't conserved anything, but one of the things that they haven't conserved is conservatism. So even Edmund Burke now sounds like an extremist. So I did a video that was just putting Edmund Burke up against Rousseau, and it got a huge negative reaction from people who would call themselves conservatives. So I'm doing kind of the evergreen, what I'd see as evergreen, but applied to today kind of content. And then news stuff. But as far as what the news, it tends to be a little bit more subjective what I pick to talk about. So does this interest me, and do I want a fun take on this? Would I and that may sound stupid and not I'm not serving other people, but that instinct at some level has helped, at least if I don't know, because there are a lot of content creators out there who are making lots of interesting, fun stuff. But the nice thing about being able to do 1 to 2 monologues a week is I can be selective. and if something doesn't strike my interest, or if I think like, that seems like a distraction or kind of a boring story, if it's a slow news week and everybody finds, some dumb thing to obsess over, I don't have to be a slave to that. So I can, again, just like, I'll pull out a Chesterton essay that I read in high school and that becomes content. And I think, so that's part of it is I want to be timely. I want to, and also don't want to just chase trends, but I'll be doing a show about the Trump assassination attempt, because of course I'm going to. But yeah, so it's a combination of like following the trends that I think are actually meaningful. And if I do talk about a trend that I don't think is meaningful, then that will be the point of the video. And then the other end of it is just bringing back great thinkers, people I like a lot, including folks who didn't call themselves conservatives, or people who, Chesterton hated the idea of conservatism. He thought it was lame and boring. But yeah, so when I say having conserved conservatism, I just mean like the great thinkers. We haven't conserved an intellectual history. So that's been at least some of my strategy. And yeah, it's been fruitful so far, and I've been pleased to see that.
What do you think is the most effective? What is the most effective medium, or where is the most effective place to talk on the internet? Where, like Santiago was talking about, a while back, it was like the Jon Stewarts and the Stephen Colberts was where it was at politically. That's where people were getting their news, their content. Before that, the traditional media. What's that hotspot right now, do you think?
LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's LinkedIn. Yeah, I'm a big Gary Vee guy, so everybody needs to be over on LinkedIn. Right. Post your clips, 20 clips a day. If you're not, then you're not getting after it. It's Elon tweeted about this. So there's a preview of my answer. But he said that when this Trump thing happened over the weekend, he tried to get information on the news websites. He tried, and it was hours behind. It was wrong for way longer than what he got when he went over to X, when he went over to Twitter. And so he's trying to catch up, and then he finds out, his own platform, we're getting information and we're getting it quickly, and it's getting narrowed down, and it's getting corrected much more quickly than, like, we know when it feels like speculation. And then we've got these kind of like news people who are, yes, maybe being more restrained, but they're also saying stupid stuff like loud noises happen, Trump falls, incident occurs. And that's like, because it's more restrained, like you can have an admiration for, at least they're trying to be objective. But when you've got people on X, like really trying to get to the bottom of it and figure it out quickly, you just know, if you're an like half intelligent person, that you're going to have to sift through some stuff, and then, we'll get to it eventually. We'll correct it. So yeah, I think it's X, and I think like YouTube seems to be, so it's X, things get like worked out on X, and then, kind of codified on people's YouTube shows and podcasts. And then like hours later, it's on TV. And then like, if something gets corrected on Twitter, then it has to go through the like YouTube to TV pipeline again. And so like some people don't want to constantly be keeping up with every single tweet that's going on. And so like what my show being on Twitter and also being on YouTube, functions sometimes in a way of like recapping, here are the details, here's the stuff that happened. But I mean, like you said about Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, they were basically trying to condense, here's what happened in cable news today. And so they saw themselves, they were mainly riffing off of, like, the media became the story. And I think they were, where the energy was in the cable news world. And so then they were later than the news. And so, like, we're like dealing with stuff, and all the jokes that Colbert and Jon Stewart would have written after it became on the news and the news did the story. And then hours later, like Stewart came on at 11 PM Eastern. And so like the story had happened. And so like, but yeah, we're working out the details of it and making the jokes all as part of one big process on X, which is an exciting place to be. And then, yeah, YouTube is kind of a place where we reflect on what we've discovered. And I like both of those vibes. And I also understand that like some people don't have the time again just to keep up with every single thing, like that process. And so they'll listen to podcasts to get like at least somebody's summary of here's all the raw material that we found over here on X. But yeah, I think that's where the like mining energy is, and then like somebody presents it all in a more codified format. It's strange to call a podcast a codified format, but it's more codified than somebody's like 18-word tweet about this crazy thing that just happened.
Yeah, I'm curious. I think I agree with all of that, and I'm something that Josh and I talk about here in the past is there's still a lot of conservatives who demonize Twitter. They'll just sort of cast it aside as well. You can't have meaningful discussions with 248 characters, whatever. And I do agree with some of those questions, some of those concerns, where there are topics that I think are generally difficult to hash out if you're doing like super detailed, like at minutia level theological discussions, for example. Like Twitter's not going to be a great medium to do that. But on the flip side, so that aside, the capacity to create narratives, like you said, I think do the jokes, the reporting, the analysis, all at the same time, at the same layer where the discussion is happening. It still like frustrates me that a lot of people on our side still don't get that. And they're like, oh, Twitter is just for fighting. Twitter is just silly and dumb.
Right.
So
yeah,
what do you think of that?
Yeah, it's certainly like Twitter is not for long form discussions. It's not for hashing out disagreements. You can sort of like state your position and then say like, DM me, we'll talk offline, or like, hey, we'll do a podcast on this. We can do a debate. Some people who think that it is are basically like treating it like Facebook, and Facebook is like the cringe version of this, where like somebody will get, just 18 like comments like back and forth about some, again, niche theological topic or some particular speculation about some news event. And I think those are basically just misguided, like don't know what the medium is. And so like Twitter, you dunk, that's what you do. And then if you realize, oh, this is not somebody I should dunk on, this is somebody I should have a more detailed conversation with, or like we're operating in good faith, we like each other, we should just go over here. You have to just like know where you are. It's like, I mean, yeah, you wouldn't, in the same way that if you go on cable news, you don't expect to be able to really get down to the issues. You're going to be yelling at each other. That's just the way. But like, if you deceive yourself into thinking, oh, that's what that is. But I think part of it also is that people see that impulse as a negative thing. Like it's fun. Yes, it's fun to dunk, but you're feeding your worst instincts. But like, there's actually a lot of things that just need to be dealt with in pure dismissal. And also like dunks are a perfectly legitimate thing for a human being to do. And like, it's not the only thing you should do. If that's the only thing you're doing, then you're probably a little bit unhealthy. And there are some people who are very fun on Twitter and not fun at all in real life. I've met a handful of those in my time in like conservative media or whatever, and just in general about like theological topics, where you're like, you may be very good at this thing, but it doesn't mean that you're like a joy. I don't want to invite you to my like house for dinner. But yeah, I think that there's, I understand the problem of being too on Twitter and thinking that's the only mode of operation. But it's okay to have multiple platforms. It's okay to like have things where it's like, oh, this sounds like you and me should sit down for a conversation. Or, I mean, like Michael Foster's great on this, where he'll just be like, I know how much I can talk to you. And then at a certain point, I realize this discussion is not fruitful. We'll either talk offline, or I'm not your like counselor. I'm not your pastor. And I'm also not, it's also not my responsibility to make sure that everybody on Twitter understands that my take is exactly right, which all of them are, by the
way. Yes. I think the other piece that seems to not factor into conservatives who dismiss Twitter outright is that so many of the elites in society are on Twitter, and that you can actually reach them with the right. You can reach them, not just them, but you can reach them. You can catechize them, if you would, with the right memes, the right posts, the right narratives, the right monologues. in ways that, like you could only do that if you were Stephen Colbert going, or Stewart going live at 11 p.m. Eastern back in the day, and the conversation was only one way. Was them sort of shaping the narrative down here as opposed to a two-way discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I've got Colbert jokes in my head and like Jon Stewart jokes in my head that still stick in there and that I've like thought about because they're really well done, or like they really made me laugh, or like it made me think about something in a different way, like hopefully not in a bad direction, but because they were talented people, they could do that, and they could put a stone in your shoe just with a stupid joke if it's well done enough. And the fact that you can do that to journalists, or the fact that you can do that to people with much larger profiles than yours, because, you just happen to come up with a really good comeback or a really good meme about something. That's a new way of sort of making your way in there. And like I can put a stone in the shoe of a U.S. congressman. Like that is insane. And like U.S. congressman, as well as like a person who has a radio show, or a person who just is like much more like a policy person, propaganda person. Those are all like people at my disposal if I'm talented enough, or if my thing gets in somebody's head, which is great. Great position for like nobodies who just are disciplined. Twitter's so dependent on writing too. Like you guys know this, like Twitter is writing. And if you develop your writing skills, it just shows that like the written word is not something that, people don't read anymore, people don't do books anymore, whatever. Like the written word is this kind of thing, this kind of eternal persuasive thing that pushes people, changes people, and has since the invention of it. And it's this kind of like, talk about Lindy. I mean, like if you can put word, like one word after another in a way that makes somebody want to keep going, that's like an insane persuasive, like you can grab somebody's soul just with that one skill.
Yeah, 100%. So what as you think of like, narratives, essays, thinkers in conservatism that we've lost, are there, what ideas are you interested in reviving and sort of bringing back to the mainstream, to the discourse?
Yeah. I think something that we all heard sometime between 2016 and 2020 was that it was the push of the new liberalism, right? So what used to be called what we call conservatives today. This is their presentation. What we call conservatives today is really just liberals. They used to be called liberals back in the day because they loved freedom so much. And I think that it fundamentally is it's a great rhetorical move. It's a great way of like getting people to grab onto your thing, and because conservatism or like the right or whatever is such a lame way of talking about it. But now we're cool because we use their term. We're actually using their terminology, and that gives us cool points somehow. But I'm fundamentally opposed to the idea that like the right is just another form of liberalism, that liberalism is this eternal thing that always really existed. And fundamentally opposed also to the idea of the liberal idea that like everybody can come to the perfect vision of politics and how people should behave just by sitting in an armchair and thinking about it long enough. And so like I want people, like the spirit of what I want is for people to feel much more rooted to their particular people, their particular place. And again, not just like pure ideology and like making sure everything is just internally consistent in their brains. So, because that used to be the way people wanted their politics to be. It's like, I'm totally internally consistent in my mind. But that doesn't mean that you're going to do anything. It doesn't mean you're going to achieve anything. So like mentally and in the idea sphere, just like I'm very much an anti like neoliberal. Whatever the neoliberals are doing, I don't want to do that. And then also like the spirit of the right wing. What I like about what's going on right now is that it is a very fun energy, and it's not always been that way. I think what has happened in the past is we tried to take sort of what was normal conservatism and then add, get people to say like talk radio conservatism, but do it with a fun, I don't know, like lacquer over it, like paint a lacquer over conservatism just to appeal to the youths or whatever. But when you have some kind of sense of rootedness and you have some sense of the future and optimism and excitement, that does make for a lot more fun. So, so like spiritually, I wanted to have the spirit of fun and also the spirit of rootedness and excitement about where we are and where we come from. So those are my basic enemy is liberalism, and my basic emotional enemy is like a sort of lackluster, cold academic ideological approach to the right wing.
Yeah, that all makes sense. I think the Oren McIntyre, another really really fantastic commentator and YouTuber. Now he's at the Blaze, Twitter poster. He's been really good at this, and we've talked about this on the show with him, where you have to package the ideas in a way that makes sense for the medium, and you can't, like the left is sort of notorious for their memes are like 500-word essays or whatever, because they can't just articulate thoughts. They can't articulate reality in a way that is easy, fun, that you can transact into group chats with a screenshot or whatever. Like they need a whole essay to say why this thing that is clearly bad is actually good. Are there particular thinkers or ideas that you think are sort of vital for the right to re-encounter and to embrace again?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much an American, and so like my quick answers to that are going to be mostly American thinkers. At least the beginnings of those are going to be. So like I read Pat Buchanan years ago, and that was like a huge deal for me, and helped me with understanding. I read it I think in 2015 or so, and that was a big deal for me in like understanding what was happening in the right wing movement at that point. And so like, I think Pat Buchanan has gotten a lot of love recently, which I'm thrilled with. But also I think, what's been comforting for me, I did an essay. I did a video about an essay. Who did it? It was Murray Rothbard. He did an essay called Egalitarianism as a Rebellion Against Nature, Revolt Against Nature was what it was. And I thought that was such a great essay, and it was really helpful for me in getting the idea of equality and even equality of opportunity, clarifying those kind of issues for me. And same with like Russell Kirk, and same with Edmund Burke, and these people who are in our intellectual history that we've kind of dropped because we think of it as, I don't know, if we want to call ourselves like the new right or whatever, a lot of times people will want to just find every new idea that comes along and be like, oh, this guy has a good take, this guy has a cool blog, or this guy's great on Twitter. But like having some kind of sense of rootedness is important. But back to the Rothbard essay, when I did that video about egalitarianism, very quickly after that, I reread C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Proposes a Toast. And in that essay, or in that short story, I guess, whatever you want to call it, there's a section where he just really is harsh on the use of the word democracy and the use of the word equality as this incantation. So using it as like a spell that makes people just stop thinking. It was a really helpful, and all of it, underneath all of it is just envy. So you got envy, and then I get to use the word equality to mask that and turn it into, oh, I'm actually a principled person. I have a principle that I'm here willing to defend. So after having done the Rothbard thing, I was really comforted to also for it to rhyme with this insight from C.S. Lewis, who I've respected for a long time. And so it's been fun, I think, to rediscover right-wing writers from the past, and also people who people wouldn't consider as like political writers, like C.S. Lewis, and Chesterton. I mean, Chesterton, I think that he was wrong on a handful of things on politics, but it doesn't mean that his clear thinking on everything else should just be thrown out. So anyway, it's that's been, like I said, a comforting thing that we're not on our own, and we're not like inventing something new. And if we're going to be doing something new, then we should be first discovering these people, and then second citing our sources. Because I think that some people will be comforted by that. Your audience will be comforted by, oh, he's quoting C.S. Lewis. He's not insane. he's not doing some like edgelord garbage. This is like actually he's trying to pull back something that's in my heritage, something from a person that I've enjoyed for quite a while. So like I said, I love quoting Murray Rothbard, but also like Murray Rothbard, and the fact that he is saying something that rhymes with what C.S. Lewis is saying gives me some grounding, and also gives your audience a little bit more to grab onto.
Yeah. Well, what is your view of edgelord posting and fringe posting? Well, I mean, there's a lot of that on the right, online right, let's say.
Right.
So words for them. What do you say?
Yeah, I think I get the impulse, number one. So like, it's very fun. Like pushing things in the edge is very fun. And you've also got to recognize, like, there are going to be differences between the politicians who have to be like on the edge of the Overton window and the activists who are outside of it, and decidedly so. Like are not excited about being, when they find themselves somewhere in the Overton window, they feel insane. Like, what am I doing here? And so like there are going to be always like perspectival differences, tactical differences. But like the overall spirit of it, I think sometimes because when like the idea of being an edgelord is your North Star, that can be pretty messy. Mainly because you're not headed anywhere. You're not like, if you're just trying to get reactions, then that's a bad thing. But I also like, again, I recognize that at some level we have to have room for experimentation with ideas. We have to have room for like letting people kind of run for a little bit, and then not everything's going to be mature when it comes out. And I think Lomez has actually spoken about this, where with art specifically, that the left is really good at letting artists just kind of run with something and like try something out, because we may lose some money, but we've given them an opportunity to try something out. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And the right tends to think of it, tends to not be as comfortable with that iterative process, with that, like, let's try this out. This may not work. This may be off base. Let's see. So I like I said, I understand the role that the like edgelord posting has. But I mean, and like some edgelord posting is very fun, and others of it just kind of comes off as like clumsy and unattractive. So like sometimes I'll think like, oh, you know what? I'd be really interested in that topic if it weren't coming from you. Like, you personally are actually standing in the way of me being interested in your cause. And that's like tragic and sad. And that's, I don't want to make my taste the arbiter of all this. But yeah, like when I don't know, there's something to vibes. And if you can pick up a like weird vibe from somebody, and if you're constantly having to like separate the message from the messenger, it's not great. It's not good for our side, even if you do want to push it in a healthy direction. Like if somebody, there's a way of talking about the 19th Amendment that is like fun and having a good time, and also like there's serious arguments behind it. And there's a way of talking about it that's just like, oh, I don't like you as a person. Like, even if I agree with you, like, oh, that's not the thing I'm going to retweet or the thing that I'm going to engage with. But anyway, those are my scattered thoughts on edgelord posting.
What do you think about the?
Again, I'm hesitant to make enemies. Right.
Yeah. What do you think about the anon accounts? That whole phenomenon of people having these anon accounts. What's your take on that?
I think at bottom there's a huge reasonable like argument for it. And being anonymous, being able to say stuff for that iterative process of like, hey, we're just trying out ideas here, and if I don't want me experimenting and me like thinking through, oh, well, what about this? What about this? To like take away my job. Like I don't want my career to be at risk because I was just kind of running a reductio on somebody, or I was just oh, I was just trying to follow the logic here and see how it goes. How do we feel about this? Then I totally understand that. And also just people have different reasons for doing it. So yeah, I think that there are perfectly reasonable, like there's a long American tradition of writing anonymously, and I don't want to argue against that in any way. I understand. I'll say that I do understand why like people like Jordan Peterson are bothered by it, because it impacts them personally. So like they just get hit with a lot of anon things, and so like they in their attempt to recognize a pattern will go, oh, the problem must be that all of these people are anonymous, and I don't know whose boss to call because that person annoyed me. And so I think it when like people who are annoyed by the anonymous posting, I get that, but I also I don't know. There's no it would be silly to dismiss the idea of anonymity. We've been doing it for a while.
Yes, and I find that maybe it's been the same with you in your time in conservative media. That in many cases, again, because of the strange media that Twitter is, you can build rapport with some of these folks, and then you most often than not end up meeting them in real life, and then you can actually verify, like, are you the kind of person I'd like to have over for dinner or not? And in many cases, you are. Like, you're a normal, chill, cool dude, and using that particular anonymous persona to test ideas, to publish a particular message.
Oh yeah, and I've also felt the relief when I realize somebody is like a normal person. When you go like, oh, good, because there's always a chance that like this person just clams up when you start to even engage with them. But it is nice, and I think our side has a lot more normal folks than we like to give it credit for. Like we talk about how like, oh, we're all sort of like autistic, or we're all like sort of outcasts or whatever. But there are like normal people with families who have good reputations, who just are like, again, trying to try stuff out. That's not to say that everybody is like that. I mean, I've also met people who are not, but it is comforting every time you meet somebody and you go like, oh, cool, he has like a normal family and people like it. People who know him enjoy it.
So how did you get into this whole world, Wade?
Yeah, that is a weird story. I was in Orlando. I went to seminary for a year, and then left seminary to just do odd jobs around Orlando. I was working the phones at Ligonier Ministries, and I got a text from a friend who said, "Hey," he said, "Hey, Steven Crowder needs a sound guy," and he knew that I knew my way around a soundboard. And so I just put together, I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. I'll try it out. So I ended up going there, working there. I worked there in 2019, 2020. And so like politically, I was not extremely involved. I was reading stuff. This was around the time when I was like I said, reading Pat Buchanan and stuff, before this, but, was mostly like, I was pursuing ministry, and, second, I was also like interested in entertainment, the entertainment industry. Was reading lots of entertainment biographies and writing monologue jokes on my lunch break at Ligonier. And then I got that call to go work at the Crowder Show. So I was there 2019, 2020. And then, being able to create content so I did a year before like one of the biggest years in media ever happened. So I had a year under my belt of creating content every day. And then by that point, I was the head of creative there, which meant I was much more involved in the creative process. So it was wild. We did in April of that year, we did 2 shows a day.
Wow.
So we were doing hour and a half in the morning, hour and a half in the evening. And so I just I got kind of thrown into conservative media and thrown into talking about politics regularly. Because again, I was just a guy. I was used to sitting in the back of seminary classrooms being like, oh, this, getting annoyed at those debates. But then I got to be annoyed at political debates, which is also fun. So I did that for 2 years. And then at the end of 2020, came here to Idaho. And I've been living here since basically at the beginning of 2021. I took 2 years off where I was able to kind of help behind the scenes here at Canon. And then now, I've been doing the Wade Show since early 2023.
That's awesome. Yeah, from working the phones to Canon Press warrior.
Yeah. Content creator. That's what I do.
That's right.
Yeah. What did you say earlier? It was like narrative maker.
Narrative maker.
Crafter
I'm gonna put that that's my crafter narrative. That's my Twitter bio now. I'm doing it right now as soon as I get off this call.
What was the process you went through when you were creating the Wade Show? Coming to it fresh and saying like, hey, am I going to do short form or explainers or Twitter or YouTube or whatever it is? How did you think about that?
Yeah, there are two kind of angles to this. So like, first, I knew that I wanted to do something with comedy. So I knew that I wanted to write jokes. I knew I wanted to add that to be the kind of spirit of it. And that kind of pulls from something that happened a long time ago here at Moscow with Credenda Agenda. There was a huge like satire piece of that. And it's a piece of like Canon lore that like old heads know about, but is not something that was really active at the time. At least the satire piece. I mean, like Doug is a great writer and he has lots of great jokes. Like he's consistent laughs in his blog posts and stuff. But like the out and out, like that's the goal of this piece. Like for it to be funny and write the jokes wasn't happening at the same level. So that was the Canon pitch was like, here's a piece of Canon that I think we could really get some miles on out of. And then the other end, that was my training. It's what I wanted to do was write jokes. And then, I'd say that the other angle of it is like where it fits in the broader ecosystem. So I think that we're kind of past the explain our principles to the left period. So like, I think that there was a time where at least it made sense in our heads to be doing like, here's 5 reasons that gun control is bad or whatever. And like to try to pull people who are in the middle to a little bit more to the right, or pull people on the left, and like, we'll give them all of our rational arguments for that. And I think that like, where the Wade Show fits is much more like explain our principles to our guys, or like from an intellectual perspective, at least. So like there's the entertainment side, and then there's also like, hey, let's get on the same page about stuff. And let's understand, like I did a friend enemy video, I did the Constitution is Dead video, and just kind of hopefully catching us all up so we all have kind of something to refer to. In particular, like the Constitution video, there was the controversy, was started by Nate Fisher, I think. So like you guys were all in the middle of those conversations about whether we were ruled by the Constitution. And it was the kind of conversation that was happening with no centerpiece other than like a 2-sentence tweet from Nate. And it was true. I agreed with the tweet, but what was striking to me at that moment was all of these people who are arguing. There are some people who are going, do the reading, right? Like catch up. This is where we are. It's not that difficult once you've caught on. And then there are the other people who haven't done the reading and are just like looking for a long explainer, or are arguing out of like, I don't need to do the reading. I read the Constitution, or like I took 9th grade civics or whatever. And so like that was an interesting moment, I think, where I thought like, oh, it'd be nice just to kind of at least present my case, my version of the case, that the Constitution is not the thing that we're all ruled by. So hopefully like trying to clarify the debate, try to clarify like the debate within the debate on the right. And so like, I want the right to have at least the way that like we talked about Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert and those guys. There was a place at the end of the day, every single day for years, where the left could just kind of slip into a little warm bath, like a comedy warm bath, where all of their assumptions would be like validated, and they could think of everybody over there on the right as being crazy, even if it was just that like Rand Paul had weird hair. It was like all of my assumptions are going to be validated, and I feel like at the end of it that I've watched the news. I'm caught up on everything that happened today. And that like served a really important propaganda purpose for them, for that for their side. And so I think that the right, I don't want to do exactly that, because I would like people to think a little bit more after watching my videos, more so than just like feeling like I've done the thinking for them. So like when people say, every time I watch your videos, I feel like I have like a reading list that I got to go do. I'm like, good, that's awesome. Like I want you guys to like do work that I'm not doing here. I'm not here to give papers. I'm not here to do like policy discussions and like stand at a podium. I'm just doing like stupid videos on the internet. So that like, so that like my piece about the Constitution being dead is going to have jokes about like a fish shooting a dog or whatever. And it's like not the serious think piece. I don't take myself seriously, because who would? And so like like a lot of the comedy, I'm just monologuing at this point, but a lot of the comedy now is very self-serious. So like you felt that more with, like Jon Stewart got very self-serious. He would end every single one of his monologues with like, sometimes he'd end it with like a tear. He'd like cry at the end of these monologues, and you're just like, dude, you're a comic. You're a nightclub comic who got a TV show on Comedy Central. Your lead-in is puppets, as he always said, but saw himself as like an important figure in media. And so like, I never want to get there. So all of my thoughts about like, I think this is why it's good, and this is my philosophizing about why I want to do this. I don't ever want to be that guy. I don't ever want to be the guy who at the end of the day thinks like, wow, we've done important work here. Everybody pat me on the back, because that was a lot, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm thankful that I want it to function to where people can, hopefully like it pushes them in a little bit of the right direction. But also it was just like, even if I disagree, that was a really fun time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Why do you think? Yeah. So I have a couple of questions. That was really helpful, kind of outlining your process and strategy. First thought is, so you mentioned Jon Stewart ended up becoming sort of self-serious in terms of his comedy. On the right, though, what we're seeing is a lot of just cringe, cringe content.
Interesting. Yeah.
Why do people on the right do that? When sort of the gaps are open for us to just run and like, we have people's attention, people are interested in these ideas, and then it's like, we won't name names, but just cringe stuff gets put out. It's why is that the instinct?
And to be clear, you're talking about like cringe in the entertainment
cringe on the
direction?
Yeah, the right puts out cringe entertainment stuff. The left is fumbling the ball so badly. All we have to do is say something that's true or accurate, well produced, and instead we just go cringe.
Right. Well, there's the like creation perspective on that, and then there's the audience reception perspective. So like the creators of it, whether the writers themselves are talented or not, they're being handed money by people who are rationalists, and rationalists make really bad stories because they're not appealing to your emotions, or they're not appealing to your sub-rational or supra-rational faculties. And so like the left, who is not bound by rationalism, and again, I'm not making an argument against reason, but like if they're not bound by rationalism, they're going to be okay with, you're just making a purely emotional appeal. That's okay for them. And that's like, so like if you're being handed money by rationalists, then you have to be making the point. You have to be making your case. If your sitcom has to be about why gun control is stupid or whatever, then you're hogtied. There's no, like, you can't experiment, you can't have fun, and like nothing great has been created under that kind of constraints. Like constraints are part of making stuff. But like whether these writers are talented or not, like I said, the way the money comes to them is just not like conducive to their talents being on display. And then there's the other side of it where the audience is so desperate for something that does align with their worldview that they'll take anything. And that's sad. It's sad that they've been put in that position and like failed by cultural leaders for so long that they really don't know any other option. And so I think from both ends of that, those things can be fixed. Because I mean, like I'm big. I am in Idaho. I love Canon Press, so I'll shill for Canon Press for a little bit. What I loved about Canon Press and why it was attractive to me is there were more, like when I ran across Doug's books for the first time, I was like finding more insights per page than I'd ever found anywhere else, and so like more insights about like pastoral insights or family parenting, whatever. And so I just knew, I recognize the value immediately. And that made me go, are there any other books by this Doug Wilson fella? Turns out there's 100. And so I had plenty of reading material. But I think that like, if the audience, if the right-wing audience or the conservative audience gets good stuff, my hope is that they will like recognize, I've never felt anything actually when I was watching those other right-wing pieces of content, the cringe content. But now it's like suddenly I'm feeling something, and I actually, I enjoyed that more than I'm used to. What's this, And that's that you have to, in order to do that, you have to appeal to something other than bare reason and somebody's confirmation bias or confirmation, like loving the clapter. Like we make fun of the left for clapter, right? Why can't we make fun of ourselves for doing the same thing? And the funny thing is, clapter, the term was invented by Seth Meyers. So like he was saying like, he said, I don't want to go for the clapter thing, and the people were like, they picked up on that. That's amazing. What an amazing, neologism. But no, it was him, and then that's his entire like income is based on clapter now. So, but that was, I mean, back in like the Norm, when Norm was on Weekend Update, that was their whole thing is we will sacrifice a big laugh for a bunch of people going, ooh, like, ugh, for a joke that we like. So if we don't like the joke and it got a huge laugh, I don't care. Get that thing off the cue cards. We're doing this one where everybody groans and hates it because, that was good. And the only audience is not just the people that were in that room in Studio 8H. It was like the people across the country who like are still watching those clips now. How many are you still, anybody watching the Kevin Nealon Weekend Update episodes? Like, no, we're all just rewatching Norm episodes because we get it. And like, we connect with him over years later. But yeah, if you're doing something, then you're going to, it's, you have to believe in the thing you're doing and be okay with, not going for the easy laugh or for the easy money or for the easy, anything necessarily easy. Not that easy's bad, but there are other things too.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that's something that Doug does. That's something that Norm does of like, they treat their audience like it's someone they like who is intelligent, which that's it. And that's
how rare is that?
Exactly. And that's where I feel like the cringe gets generated, like, Fox News or whatever, where they're like, what dribble do we have to shove at this stupid audience that they'll eat up? And then that's what they create.
Yeah. They're just like slop on your plate. Just like, take this.
So on topics of audience, though, and going back to your strategy, some of the videos you put out, I thought they were great, but the reaction to them was polarizing. So talk a little bit about that.
Which one are you thinking of in particular?
The Constitution was that. I mean, Nate tweeted that out, and a lot of people accused him, and then you, and then everybody that got involved accused people that were saying that the Constitution was dead. Accuse them of wishing that the Constitution
being happy about it,
or prescribing that it should die, as opposed to describing that it was not being treated seriously. And then you had the other, I guess was it the Edmund Burke video?
The freedom isn't for everyone.
People like conservatives particularly react to it negatively. Like, wait, this can't be right. And then you did the Carl Schmitt video, and like Carl Schmitt is a Nazi so bad. Like, we should never hear about that guy bad. So how do you, as you try to make more intelligent, thoughtful, still lighthearted and fun, but thoughtful, grounded content? Why do you think conservatives just react? A bunch of our guys love it, obviously, but then there's conservatives that don't. How do you see that play?
Yeah, I think that there are two sides. So one side of this is that people are used to people on the right talking purely in prescriptive terms. And so if you start describing how things are, same with the Carl Schmitt thing, where it's like, oh, I talk about friend enemy. What you're saying is that we should fight more, or you're saying you're just being belligerent, or you just like, you want us to hate people more, or whatever. It's just, no, this is a like phenomenological, like I'm just pointing out the way things are. And I tried to say that as clearly as possible in that video, but it still is very difficult for people who are used to hearing conservatives who are ideological, talking about, well, in an ideal utopia, this is how free trade would work, and this is how like free exchange would work, and this is how free speech would work. This is the ideal world. And so when somebody just kind of comes along and says, well, this there are like barriers to your utopia, or that there are some, and those barriers are not things that I just thought about in my head. Back to the like being against rationalism or being against liberalism, like some of the things that I didn't reason myself to thinking that there is such a thing as friend enemy, or thinking I didn't reason myself to thinking that the Constitution is dead. What I did was I looked around, I did some reading, I reasoned with the reading, but it's also a matter of like, again, being able to have eyes in your head, open your eyes and not see just the ideas on paper. So I think that like, because we're used to dealing in ideological terms or dealing in utopian terms, it just hits people weird when you aren't talking in those terms. But yeah, I think that's a huge part of it, and I think also that there are some people who are just catching up, and that's fine. Like with the Constitution one in particular, there's an emotional attachment people have to the idea that we live in the constitutional order, because they think of that as their only weapon. So the Constitution has always been there, like, oh, well, I've always got that card in my back pocket. I can just say, well, the Constitution says this, and if I say, well, that isn't going to work, then that undermines a huge portion, not just of their worldview, but also of their strategy. What am I going to do when things get really bad? And so it sounds like I'm discouraging them, or I'm taking away their only weapon that they ever thought they were going to have, or I'm taking away their only reason for loving America. So if the reason I love America is because of a really great document that was written 200 something years ago, then I'm like screwed if that document isn't actually governing us, or if I'm saying something in it like other than it's perfect and amazing and we're living in that order now. So people get nervous about it, and it's mostly, I would say, an emotional reaction to it, which is not to denigrate it, but just to say like most of the reactions were yes, either saying that if somebody accuses me of hating the Constitution because I think that it's changed so much that it's unrecognizable and, dare I say, dead, then that's not somebody who like engaged with the argument and then found my conclusion. Your conclusion is the Constitution was the worst thing that ever happened to humanity. So like something else is going on there, and it's not. It's not. So it's funny that the rationalists can be the most irrational, and like they're thrown off by simple descriptions, thrown off by something again that might be a little bit out of their wheelhouse. And Michael Malice says this all the time, that like when people's minds are like mouse traps where they'll just like snap down. They have phrases that occurred when a topic gets brought up, that I'm going to say this phrase, and that's how most people's minds work. And I'm a little bit more, I'm not as much of a materialist. I'm not a materialist like Malice is. But there's certain habits of thought that I think have just made people more likely to respond in the way that they have to those videos. But I love them, and I want them to keep watching my videos.
Yeah, of course.
Just keep watching. Keep watching. That's the like, subscribe, the whole
stay
deal.
tuned for more. Yeah, that's right. I think, how much of it do you think is also just to do, you mentioned this at the beginning, with the world we live in, the water we swim in, the air we breathe is sort of, post-war consensus liberalism. And so it's really hard in many cases to, it's overused at this point, but really like the red pill metaphors of like the Matrix, that whole dynamic. It's hard in many ways to snap out even conservatives, even well-meaning conservatives, out of the trappings of post-enlightenment, post-war consensus liberalism, where you're being offensive if you if you just point out that something about the world today is not just right, but is at the center or contributing to the decay that we're seeing today.
Right. Yeah. What was the question?
Just
Sorry,
how much do you think the narrative reaction is conservatives still living in the post-war consensus liberal order, where the air we breathe is liberalism, and so they're having to reckon with those things. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really difficult to evaluate your baseline assumptions. And a lot of times when those get hit, they'll just repeat the assumptions back at you. So like if I'm hitting an assumption, hitting something at the bottom, then I'm just going to get an echo of it, which is understandable. So and like psychologically, it totally makes sense. And there are some folks who won't be like persuaded along the way, and that's fine. You just kind of have to be okay with that. And then at some level, we'll just, I don't know. This sounds like, I don't know how this sounds, but like at some point, there are some people who won't be convinced until there's a new consensus. And so like when the consensus is there, then I'm fine to go along with that, but I won't be involved in the process of moving the Overton window, and I'm not going to be very comfortable on the edges of it. And that can be true of historical topics or philosophical topics. Politically, it's difficult to see outside of where you are. And most people who, some people should be doing politics, other people shouldn't. But it's okay that some people just need to go along with the majority. I think that's okay.
Yeah, it's interesting to see even the last couple of days after the Trump assassination attempt, there's people on Twitter even who have explicitly said like, oh man, I feel like I can finally say I'm pro-Trump. Like it's a consensus now. Like now, phew, thank goodness. Now I can actually say it.
Yeah. Well, and like Jeremy Carl, I believe did you guys have Jeremy Carl on?
We've not had him on, no, but he was here in the office a couple weeks ago.
Should. Yeah. Oh, great. I love Jeremy. But yeah, he talked about the preference cascade thing, where he was hoping that, when people were approaching him, he was approaching people about writing the book. And then they said, great idea for a book. You should get a non-white person to write it. And he said, what I'm hoping is that this kind of starts people to be able to say out loud this thing that I'm trying to make a case for, that anti-white discrimination is real and anti-whiteness is real in America. But like the fact that he has said that, now I don't have to write that book, but I can interview him and I can talk about it. So it's a bunch of work that this guy did and that I didn't have to do. And that now it's a matter of just riding that wave that he was brave enough. There's the wave metaphor is not going to work here, but like he was, brave enough to take the first step. And then I can just say, oh yeah, me too. I've noticed this thing that this, 300-page book makes a case for. But yeah, I think that that's essential. And you have to recognize like, it's okay if some people need to wait till a few more people stand up and say, hey, maybe we should vote for Trump. Maybe that's okay. Maybe that's morally all right as a Christian. And then, that cascade can happen. And some people will wait for that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, some people are either temperamentally or even in terms of skills, they're better suited for the middle of the Overton window, wherever that Overton window is.
Sure. And I don't like begrudge anybody for being there.
Yeah, totally. No. So we're 4 months away from the election. Wade, as you're planning about your content and your memes and the memes of production, what are you excited about? What are you thinking over the next 4 months?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in 2020, we had a very clear, like, it was COVID, it was riots, it was election. What was the election legit? Like, those are kind of our three. We all have a pretty clear overlay of that. Whereas now we have 2024. I don't really know how to frame this other than like it was indictments, conviction, assassination attempt, and then like that's the middle of the year. So like we're a month later than like the first Floyd riots were in 2020. And 2020 didn't stop a month after the Floyd riots. So part of it is like recognizing, okay, this is not, when 2024 came around, everybody was kind of speculating, oh, what's the new disease going to be? Oh, I know it's going to be the new disease. And oh, what's the new, I have a friend who like will text me text me stories or email me stories about like bad interactions with cops, and he'll like the heading he puts on there is America's Next Top George Floyd. And so it's like, what's the new disease? What's the new George Floyd? But like what we've had is a very different and more, I think, desperate like attempt from the left to go after stuff. So we're in much more like last resort kind of status, or like in that part of the story. But yeah, there's a certain amount of planning that you can do, which is like, oh, I'd love to do an essay about T.S. Eliot. I'll do a video about T.S. Eliot's essays. That'd be really fun. And then there's other parts of planning that are just going to have to be, man, like I wasn't planning last week on doing a video about an assassination attempt, but here we are.
Yep, it's the world we live in. The content machine and the content possibility machine just keeps spinning. Keeps spinning.
Oh yeah.
Man. And then so as far as the Wade Show goes, just more videos. Where are you doing anything beyond in the Canon Plus app, or continue to push just with the monologues and the Twitter content?
Yeah, so I'm doing the monologues, and then we just started the podcast a few weeks back. So I'm doing a podcast weekly where most of the time it's been me just actually every one of them so far has been me interviewing somebody in studio, which has been really fun. Especially as a new podcaster myself, it's much more natural to interact. As much as I enjoy the phone calls and Zoom calls, it's fun to have folks in the studio. You guys have done the same thing with folks in the studios. And so I've enjoyed that, mostly like interviewing people around the office or around town. And there are, as you guys well know, plenty of interesting and cool people here. So that's been really cool. Gotten to try that out. And then I went to NatCon last week. And so got to go see a bunch of people. I got to interview Orrin McIntyre, got to shake his hand, which is very cool. And Carl Benjamin and Connor Tomlinson. We did a podcast with them. So yeah, just kind of do John Davidson, another one. And then so we're just trying out the content thing, trying out the podcast thing, and that's over on Canon Plus. So monologues are everywhere, and then the podcast is over on Canon Plus.
That's awesome. Yeah, we'll link to everything in the show notes, and Josh and I will be up in Moscow for Grace Agenda, so we'll catch you there at the blog.
Oh, great.
Yep.
Cool. Please do. Yeah,
man. Awesome. Hey, thanks for coming on the pod. This was awesome.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the New Founding Podcast. New Founding has become a rallying point for founders and investors who are taking serious bets in the face of a stagnant business culture. Our venture fund backs founders building dynamic companies, powered by American ideals and a positive national vision. These are the kinds of founders that embody the optimism and competence of the people who come on this podcast. If you're interested in investing in our fund, check out newfounding.com/venture fund and follow the link to apply.